Dearest gentle listeners, and welcome to another episode of Lady Whistledown, a Bridgerton podcast. This podcast will cover all things in the Bridgerton universe, from the TV series, the side series like Queen Charlotte, and also the books. If you are not up to date with the first half of season 3, please go and watch that first, then pop back when you're all caught up, as this podcast will contain spoilers. Now, over the last 2 episodes, we have delved into the interactions between season 3's main protagonists, Penelope and Colin. We looked at some of the deeper, unsaid words between the two. And in today's episode, it's going to be quite different in structure, as I have a friend joining me, and together we are going to look into the transition of both Penelope and Colin's characters throughout the seasons. So please introduce yourself, Patty.
I am Patty. I am in summer while you are in winter.
Yeah, so Patty is over in Ohio in America, and I am based in New Zealand. So plus side for you guys is you can distinguish our accents quite nicely. So now we must make haste into today's episode. In our last episode, we left off in season 2 with the distraught Penelope having just overheard a conversation between Colin and some of the young lords on the marriage mart. So today, Patty and I are going to discuss over the last 3 seasons, because we have quite differing ideas on when Colin kind of fell in love with or acknowledged his feelings for Penelope. So that we thought we'd go through some of the things we've discussed in the last few podcast episodes and delve a little bit deeper into those. So, Patty, what are your thoughts on Colin, our boy, and when he kind of fell in love with Penelope?
Well, when you and I originally met, I was very much like I started my TikTok of from day one. Colin loved her from day one, and I still somewhat believe that, but he is so internalized, how he internalizes everything, and he has to think through everything, and he has to formulate his entire plan before revealing himself. He really does have to think through and process everything. That and in all the rewatches, I do think that he did love her. He did not acknowledge it because he believed she was off limits. So she was not an option, but their feelings were there. He held her in high esteem. He greatly admired her, but he would not call it love because I'm not sure how much you want to say about season 3, but because what I want to say is from the part 2 of it.
We'll get there. We will get there in further episodes, but I think today we'll focus on.
Yes, basically, in the words of Colin Bridgerton, Penelope, he believed Penelope would be scooped up pretty quickly. I think everybody, nobody expected her to find a partner in her first year because she was launched early. Mm-hmm. So that was another reason she was off limits. But I don't think he expected her to end up unmarried by her 19th year.
Do you think that, I mean, we've already discussed this a little bit outside of the podcast, but do you think that if someone had propositioned Penelope in her first year out, because we've talked about the fact that she was put on the marriage mart earlier than she was supposed to be. We are both book readers, and so we know that in the book it was more so about the fact that she was not wanting to come out to the marriage mart because she was insecure about the fact that she held a little bit more weight than what she would have liked. But in the series, it's very much that Portia wanted all 3 daughters out at once, sort of get it over and done with. But do you think that the season would have gone differently if someone had propositioned Penelope in her first season? Or do you think that Colin really had to go through the last 2 seasons worth of growth in order to get to that realization?
Oh, no, I think they both had to go through growth. It goes back and forth over season 1 and season 2. Coming into season 1, the Bridgertons are well respected. They're a long, first son of a first son 9 generations back.
Mm-hmm.
So they're established, they have status, and the Featheringtons are, I equate Portia Featherington as a little bit more uncouth Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. Like
Mm-hmm.
she is definitely title seeking, fortune seeking, and she makes no bones about it. Everybody knows it. So that tarnishes her daughter's prospects a little bit. And it is very well known that Lord Featherington is a gambler and doesn't pay his debts. So that also hurts. As we see when Antony takes Daphne around the ballroom for the first time, and he's like, no, no, no. And all of his reasons kind of spell out. And it also spells out why I think that Colin wouldn't acknowledge his feelings, because she said, "Oh, he looks pleasing," and Antony's like, "He's a second son. We can do better." And Colin is what now? A third son.
So fun.
Yeah, by the time Antony and Benedict, when they marry and have kids, and assuming as prolific as the family is, some of those will be boys, Colin's never going to get the title.
No.
In his mind. Like, he's no. So believing that Penelope has the best chance of any of the Featherington daughters, he's thinking there's no way. Like, he's not good enough.
And I think that's a very running theme throughout all the seasons and throughout most of the Bridgerton brothers, actually. We see it with Antony in the first season. It doesn't go into it in the series, but in the book, Antony believes that he's going to die at the same age as his father. He has this absolute PTSD, deep-seated fear that he's going to die. And that is the reason why he does not want to love someone, because he doesn't. And I think they play into that a little bit in the series, that he is so afraid of loving someone. And we see it when Kate falls off the horse. He's so afraid of loving someone because if you love someone, you open yourself up to that absolute pain of losing them. So
Yes.
in that respect, Antony doesn't feel worthy, or he doesn't feel like he wants to allow someone to love him because he never wants to put anyone through that. Benedict, for the last 2 seasons, we've seen he's being incredibly lost. We see him talking in the season. We're not going to go too far into it, but we see him talking this season about how, like, he's finally found a sense of purpose in when Antony is away and running the family estate, but he doesn't take over the full force of it. Like, we still see it is the mama, it is Violet who is leading Francesca on the marriage season. So I think he respects that boundary of his mum is still the head of house, whereas Antony is trying to take over that whole role himself. And then Colin very much feels that he has no purpose, he has no value outside of being a Bridgerton. And they really talk about this so much more in the books about how Lady Whistledown talks about them, because their status that they hold to society as who are they viewed as is very much Bridgerton first, person second. And all of the siblings actually hold a lot of insecurity in those titles, that they will always be a person second. And Colin very much does not want to be a Bridgerton. Like, he loves his family, he wants to be part of the Bridgerton family, but he wants to be his own man. And I think the first 2 seasons is very much his struggle of trying to find his purpose, trying to find his individuality outside of being a Bridgerton. And on that note, let's talk about Marina, Miss Marina Thompson, secondary Crane. So we see in season 1, Colin going after Marina. And I have talked to you about this, that, I mean, in today's society, we think nothing of first loves, second loves. I think all kinds of love are valid. And I think he did hold affection for her. But I do think it was very much that puppy love that was driven by society. We see the mamas talking about where one suitor goes, all follows. And at that point, Colin is very much a follower. He's got 2 brothers who are philandering all about town, who frequently visit brothels and whatnot. And he knows that's not what he wants to do. So when everyone shows an interest in Marina, and as we have said, because she is tied to the Featherington family, he views her as a suitable match because he values Penelope's feelings towards other people. He sees her as being the ultimate judge of character, and if Penelope thinks that this girl is worthy, then she must be. And then for all the male suitors in town to then find Marina to be of suitable character to court, he says, oh, okay, this is what society expects of me, and he goes after her, not because he is choosing her over Penelope, but because in his mind, Penelope is not an option, but Marina is. Thoughts?
Somewhat similar school of thought, but as Gene Wilder used to say in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, take that and reverse it. I think the Bridgertons are brought up because of their stature, learning all the rules. This is done. This is not done. You must be like this. I think they know how the game works, and I think that where Colin doesn't believe that he is the best match for Penelope because of what she could bring to the family, title, whatnot, he does know that by name he can help. And as we know, where one suitor goes, other ones follow. And knowing that Portia put all of her daughters out on the mart at the same time, Marina's pretty. A lot of guys are swarming. Gentlemen, they weren't guys back then. A lot of gentlemen were swarming. Part of it in the beginning,
or as Polin would say, I don't see a gentleman amongst us.
Right. I concur. There is no gentleman amongst us. So I think the initial was he is a flirt. He's charming. Everybody knows him as charming. He is a flirt. He's flirted with every girl. Not so much Penelope, but there's familiarity there. I think she was kind of like on a pedestal, but he had her in a place of reverence. She is in a place of reverence in his life, and like he treats her differently from every other woman from the beginning, and everybody mistakes it as he views you like a little sister. He doesn't view you any different than Hyacinth or Eloise, but that's partially like he views her as part of his family already. Yes, the part of season 2, I think it's very important. We do see through scripting a transition of her being associated with the family and then him purposely trying to separate her. But in season 1, like he initially finds Marina pretty. He wants, he's flirting with her, but he also consciously knows if I am going to her house to visit her, other suitors are going to come. The room's going to be full of suitors, and there are other potential debutantes in the Featherington girls and Penelope. Like, I really do think, because one of Colin's main core character traits that we see from the beginning is he is incessant need to help and protect Penelope. We see it when he takes her to the dance floor after Cressida spills the water on her. So I think that his thought is always, Marina's great. She's nice. She listens to me about whatever I want to say, which nobody in my family really does. She'll sit and she always gushes. Oh, I could bring her dandelions and she would gush over them. So he likes her fawning. I won't even call it admiration because it was fake. He likes her fawning, but he also is very much like he knows there is a knowledge there that him frequenting the house and him potentially courting Marina, which he feels like is more of a fit for him because she is a cousin. She is not part of the titled family, which would have been a good match for a third son and help elevate that family. So he has a close friend in that family. He wants to elevate her prospects. He absolutely would seek this alliance because ultimately what he wants to do is make sure Penelope has her best chance.
And the funny thing is Marina, as we have seen now in season 3, but we do see it all throughout all 3 seasons, is Marina is acting the exact way that Portia tells Penelope how to act in order to ensnare a man. And it wasn't with wiles at all. It was You need to listen to everything that they're saying, make them feel like they're the most interesting man in the world, hang on their every word, insert a little bit of sexual tension to like pique their interest and hurry them along. It's funny because as she befriends Penelope, she comes up as this very genuine character. And so you think initially, oh, maybe they are a good match. Like, obviously, I think from day one, majority of us, if not all of us, were rooting for Penelope and Colin. You could see that little infatuation that Penelope has in the early days. And I think most of us were rooting for them. But when Marina comes along and she seems like a genuine character, but upon my rewatches, I realize how much she is emulating Portia's stance on how to entrap a man. Because we do know that even though she does like Colin, she doesn't she likes him as a person. She likes him as a prospect for her, but she's not actually attached to him in any sort of way, in the same way that Daphne liked Prince Friedrich. He was a lovely man. They could have had a really happy, fine life together, but it is very different from that all-encompassing, driving, passionate love that we see in,
Right.
Ed, Violet, Daphne, and Simon, and Anthony, and Kate. It's that kind of love that makes you stop thinking, or in Colin's words, can't eat. The poor boy who loves food more than anything.
No,
We
if Colin
see him
can't eat, there's a problem.
Colin can't eat. There is a problem. We don't see him stop eating for Marina. The boy's like, give me the food. I'm more interested in the food than my wife. Let's be real. Penelope is his sweet treat. But I digress. Going back to the main part is Marina is being exactly that, but they are both playing a part in that. For Marina, Colin is playing the part that he thinks society expects of him. He doesn't want to follow the path of his brothers. He's very much, as his mom says, the most sensitive, or one of her most sensitive children, that he wants to be a gentleman always. And first and foremost, he wants to be a gentleman. He wants to do things the right way. He doesn't want to be going off to the clubs and blendering about. He wants a wife and he wants to be loved and respected. And then he has a girl come along and says all the right things, all the things that he's supposed to want. But there is a specific scene, and I mentioned this, I think, in my episode 2 podcast, and it was talking about the scene where Penelope follows Colin into the hallway when all the Bridgertons go over to the Featheringtons' house for dinner. And Penelope is trying to talk to Colin about Marina and the fact that she's pregnant and everything, and she's trying to do it very tactfully, because back then you didn't just spill secrets, everything had to be done very tactful, very roundabout way. And we even see this with Violet talking to her children. It is never a direct conversation. It is always with metaphors and kind of back road passages to telling them how they're being idiots, essentially. But we see the way that Colin is looking at Penelope, and you've mentioned this before, is he mentions, you really are good. He mentions how good she is. And I very much think that he believes that he's actually not worthy of her. There is the part that he doesn't quite see her that way at that time. But I think it is also, even whether he has that sexual attraction to her yet, or that awakening kind of side of him, he reveres Penelope's mind and her opinion and her soul. Like he puts her up above everyone else.
Yes.
And he does so many things that would be considered improper. Like any one of these moments that he is alone with Penelope, he could be forced to marry her, and he takes that chance willingly. But in that moment, Marina comes in and she's nervous because she knows that Penelope is talking to him. She knows that Penelope cares for him in the least, and although she doesn't know that she has a crush or whatnot on him yet, but she knows that she cares for him, as in their families are close. And she comes in, but Colin's focus is still on Penelope. He turns to Marina and he does what Colin does best, and he deflects by making a joke because he feels uncomfortable. And he doesn't actually know how to be open and honest with Marina. And he says, oh, Marina listens to me. But what really is she listening to? Because he's not sharing his aspirations for life. She doesn't know anything about his travel. She doesn't know anything about his desires in life. She just knows that he wants to get married, and she's saying the words that he wants to hear. But with Penelope doesn't say the words that he wants to hear. She says things that he needs to hear. She tells him what how things are. She's very open and honest with him. And I really don't think that he believes that he's worthy of her. So even though he cares about her above all else, and we can see that he respects her opinion more than her family's, but he goes after Marina because he thinks, well, you know, this is a suitable match for me. And he even says to Penelope in
Yeah.
that moment, Marina and I have an understanding. We understand each other's minds, not our hearts. He focuses on the fact that they have an understanding. He doesn't say, I love her, she loves me.
Mhm.
So I think people are really focused on he chose Marina over Penelope.
Mm-mm.
Penelope wasn't an option at that point.
Penelope was not an option. And I am sure there are people out there that have a person that they speak about, like, there's 9 million reasons why they should not be with them. And I'm sure that this is his sister's best friend. I mean, we see how that goes in terms of tension, as that plays out over time. And she is so integrated into their family. I mean, season 2, Anthony just walks in and goes, family, and Penelope's included, right? Like
It's very
everybody, yeah, everybody in the Bridgerton household includes Penelope in the family. And I think that because Colin thinks of everyone else, I really do think this has crossed his mind. But I think he always shoves it away. He always deflects,
yeah.
like, how, if I pursued this, what would my family think? How would they feel about it? This is the Featheringtons. Um, we'd have to be related to Portia and
Violet has made it very clear that that is her absolute idea of hell. Realistically, like it's not that she hates Portia, it's that she likes to tolerate her in small doses,
right.
small, minuscule, little doses.
So I'm sure there's like times Penelope's at the house. I mean, this isn't in the show, but like she said, she's there all the time. So I'm sure there's times she's there and he's just sitting there like thinking it over, but then he's like, nope, this is how Eloise would feel. Or, well, nope, this is, like, because he's such a thinker and he just over analyzes everything until he sees a way through. Like Daphne said, he's very crafty and you never know when he's going to strike. So he thinks through every possible outcome before he acts. And when he does act, he barrels in. Then he's just like, psh.
I think that's kind of our segue into kind of discussing season two's themes, specifically for Penelope and Colin, because he is very much that deep thinker. And in season two, we start seeing him trying to better his own name. As I talked about earlier, how he doesn't want to just be a Bridgerton, he wants to be Colin first. Colin, who has accomplished his own things first. So season one, we see him be completely thrown off by the happenings of Marina. And I think he was even more so thrown off because it wasn't a decision that he got to make himself. It was very much Lady Whistledown writing the article and ousting Marina, which forced the Ton to force his hand, essentially. And so we see Colin kind of jump ship and he's like, okay, well, I'm going to go back to my original plan, my original desires in life, and I'm going to go traveling. And does he go traveling? But who does he go traveling with? Penelope and her letters. So you and I have talked very extensively about these letters. Season one travel, Colin comes back and he's not bragging about women. He's not bragging about fashion. He's not talking about these really superficial things. Colin comes back, and the first real moment that we see between Penelope and Colin is them discussing his travels. Now, I know that you have a lot of thoughts on this, so I'll let you take this one away. Penelope and Colin are at the races. What does she say?
Well, and I kind of want to go backwards because, as we said, Colin wants to distinguish himself as himself. He wants something that is just his Colin Bridgerton, right? So he travels and he comes home and nobody cares. Like nobody in his family cares. Nobody wants to listen to it. They act like he's droning on. And then he didn't get a chance to talk to Penelope at, when he came home, and he sees her at the races. And I always say, like with Colin, because he so internalizes everything, you have to watch his pauses, because when Colin pauses, he's thinking through exactly what he needs to say, or he's stopping himself from saying something that it's not the right time to say. And he does that there. Like, we didn't get a chance to speak, and then she's all nervously, you know, very nervously, like, oh, I said Colin, but that's nothing of note, right? Like, she's trying to save the situation. And he goes, Pen, pause. How have you been? Like, he didn't want to ask, how have you been?
You can see the pause in that drawing room. He comes back from overseas. He sees Penelope and Eloise together, and he says, so glad to see nothing has changed. And then he gives, he says, oh, they said, oh, we didn't expect to have you back so soon. Because as I think they'd only just received a letter in the previous episode saying that he was now traveling through Albania. They weren't expecting to have him back so soon. And, and he says to his family, oh, I missed you. But he was very much looking at Penelope when he said that, oh, I couldn't stay away. I missed you all. And he's looking at Penelope. And I think with Colin, and this is something that Luke Newton does beautifully, is so much of how I feel about interpreting Colin's feelings for Penelope is not paying attention to the words that he says, not necessarily paying attention to, him courting Marina. I look at the way that he looks at Penelope, and it is like a man who cannot look away. He is always transfixed by her. And we see that in the books, and we see that a little bit in season 3, is he is always like when he actually allows himself to take the moment to look at her, he is always transfixed. He's staring at her in a way that he's like, oh, whoops, I'm not supposed to do this. And he switches it off. So I think it is a conscious choice that he always makes. Oh, that's my sister's friend. And he switches off his feelings to the matter. But in that moment, he comes back from overseas and he says, I missed you all. And that sentiment was, he loves his family, so of course he missed them. But that sentiment felt so directly related to Penelope. And, we get to the races, and as we only have a 40-minute time slot for the Zoom call, we probably can't dig too far into season 2 on this episode, but we will hopefully do another one in the following week, digging more into season 2, because as we know, there is so much to unpack with their relationship in
There's
season 2.
There's a lot with season 2, yeah. But that's the build-up.
We see it is the build-up, and we really see him making intentions of being the man that he wants to be able to be with Penelope or someone else, but Penelope. We are all Polin shippers over here. But season 2, we see he comes back, they're at the races, and he is so excited to finally talk to Penelope, because she is more excited possibly than him. Oh, Colin, you've been on all these travels, you've been to all these countries, you've been doing all these things, and she is excited by it. It's not just that Marina of saying the right thing. You can say the right thing, but the tone in which you say it in are really important. So I think with Colin and Penelope and Luke Newton and Nicola, they are masters at what they do, because there is so much unwritten, unspoken words in a subtext of how they say things, in their body language towards each other, in their eye contact. And I think this is how Nicola and Luke has just tricked us in real life as well, because their chemistry with just their eyes is just off the charts. And they both have those baby blue eyes, or as Penelope puts it, the way that your eyes sparkle when you are being kind, and then he reverts back with your blue pools. They have those.
He could have done better.
He could have done better.
I love that scene, but he could have done better.
There were so many. As a happily married woman, like, I am transfixed by the absolute depths of beauty in those eyes, and there are so many words and synonyms that he could have used to describe them. But blue pools, come on, writer Colin, you can do better. But I digress. We're looking at his travels and how excited he is, and he finally has that moment of like real connection and realizing, hey, I've been connected to Penelope. He comes back and he's happy. He's really happy from his travels. And that is a far cry from the Colin who returns after his travels of only 4 months of travel, mind you, in season 3. But I think we will have to wait for next week's episode to get into those finer details. But very much season 1, we see so much unsaid, language spoken between Penelope and Colin in the way that they look at each other. Well, more specifically, the way that Colin looks at Penelope gives us that biggest insight. He is always trying to hold her gaze. And I know that you said in Regency era, a woman was not allowed to meet a man's gaze back because it was deemed improper. It was deemed too forward. Correct. But she doesn't seem like she's doing it out of rules, because Penelope really does not comply with rules.
Well, and I think the two of them with each other, they're so seen by each other, even from the beginning, that they break gaze. She breaks gaze because she's like, he's gonna see that I love him. Right? Like, I can't, if he sees in my eyes, he is gonna know. It's all written there, right? And I think
looking for that moment, I think he wants it and he's searching for it. And they always get interrupted by Eloise.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. I think, especially when we get into season 2, specific things that are said, I think he is trying to gauge her thoughts, her feelings, and he doesn't want to entertain anything unless she's on the same page. And so a lot of those looks are, and it really, in season 1, she destroyed herself to save him. So like, when she gets to come back into the Bridgerton drawing room and be there and not go but down the back steps just to get to Eloise's room, she's in the Bridgerton drawing room. We see how happy he is when she walks in the room. And I think it's funny because he's singing and he halts, like his voice catches when he sees her. But after, like, when she is on the settee with Eloise and all is right in Colin's world, he gives that song some gusto for a man that just had a broken marriage.
That's because he knows his true love is waiting for him. And on that note, I think we're going to have to wrap up this podcast episode for today, because I believe we have 2 minutes left before this meeting ends. But absolutely loved getting to deep dive into this with you. I love that Bridgerton can bring two people together from across the world, because it has so much to delve into that it is so fun having someone to dig into this with. So if anyone has any other thoughts or any other things that they would like us to dig into in future episodes, please leave a comment on the Facebook page, Lady Whistledown, a Bridgerton podcast. And as always, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in, and we will see you guys another day. Yours sincerely, Lady Whistledown.